The reason most people never accomplish anything significant is not because they lack talent, opportunity, or resources. It's because they're emotional cowards who refuse to do anything that doesn't feel comfortable. They want to lose weight, but won't exercise when they don't feel like it. They want better relationships, but won't have difficult conversations when they're raised. They want financial freedom, but won't make sacrifices when it's inconvenient. They want success, but only if it comes with good feelings attached. Success requires you to do what needs to be done, especially when you don't feel like doing it, and most people would rather stay comfortable in failure than feel uncomfortable pursuing greatness. Your emotions are not your friend, they're the enemy of your potential. There was an old woman named Grace who lived in a small apartment above an antique shop in downtown Chicago. For 43 years, she dusted the same items, rearranged the same shelves, and watched thousands of customers walk past a particular corner where an unremarkable wooden bowl sat collecting dust. The bowl was plain, scratched, tarnished with age. People would pick it up, examine it briefly, then set it back down with disinterest. Grace herself had looked at that bowl countless times, never seeing anything special about it. One Tuesday morning, a quiet man in his 70s walked into the shop. He moved differently than the usual customers, while others rushed through, scanning for obvious treasures. This man moved slowly, deliberately. His eyes held the kind of knowledge that comes from decades of study. He was Dr. Harrison Webb, one of the country's leading experts in ancient artifacts. Dr. Webb spent nearly an hour in that shop. But when he reached the corner where the old bowl sat, everything changed. His hands began to tremble slightly as he lifted it. He turned it over, examining markings that Grace had dismissed as scratches. His breathing quickened. After several minutes of intense study, he approached Grace with an expression she had never seen before. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "how long has this bowl been in your shop?" "Oh, that old thing? Since before I started working here, must be over 40 years. Nobody ever wants it. I've been thinking about throwing it away." Dr. Webb's face went pale. "Please don't do anything with this bowl until I return. I need to make some calls." 3 days later, Dr. Webb returned with a team of specialists and equipment Grace had never seen before. They spent hours examining the bowl with magnifying glasses, special lights, and instruments that beeped and hummed. The results left everyone speechless. The bowl was over 3,000 years old, crafted by master artisans from a civilization most people only read about in history books. Its true value was not in its appearance, but in its age, its craftsmanship, and its rarity. The auction house estimated its worth at over $2 million. Grace stood in that corner, staring at the space where the bowl once sat, and wept, not tears of joy, but tears of profound regret. For 43 years, she had been in the presence of a priceless treasure and never recognized its value. Worse still, she had almost thrown it away. This is exactly what most people do with their peace. Your peace is that ancient bowl. It sits in the corner of your life, overlooked, undervalued, taken for granted. You dust around it every day but never truly see its worth. Meanwhile, you spend your time, energy, and attention chasing after things that sparkle and shine but have no real value. You trade your peace for the approval of people who don't even know your middle name. You sacrifice your tranquility for possessions that will be forgotten before you're buried. You exchange your serenity for achievements that will be replaced by someone else's accomplishments before the ink is dry on your obituary. The tragedy is not that peace is hard to find. The tragedy is that you already have it, but you don't recognize its value. You treat it like that dusty bowl in the corner, something common, something dispensable, something you can afford to lose. But here's what the experts know that you might not. Peace is the rarest treasure in the human experience. It cannot be manufactured, duplicated, or faked. It cannot be bought with money, earned through achievement, or inherited from family. Peace is the one treasure that can only be recognized, protected, and preserved by those who understand its true worth. Most people spend their entire lives searching for what they already possess. They climbed mountains looking for peace when peace was waiting for them at home. They traveled to distant countries seeking serenity when serenity was in their own backyard. They changed jobs, changed relationships, changed cities, changed everything except their understanding of what they're actually looking for. You see, the problem isn't that peace is missing from your life. The problem is that you've been conditioned to believe that peace is what you get after you achieve everything else. You think peace is the reward for success, the prize for accomplishment, the gift for good behavior. But that's like believing the ancient bowl becomes valuable only after someone puts it on display. The bowl was always valuable. It just needed someone who could recognize its worth. Your peace was valuable before you got the promotion. It was precious before you found the relationship. It was priceless before you bought the house, before you had the children, before you achieved any of the things you thought would bring you peace. The peace was already there, waiting for you to stop looking past it toward things that promised to deliver what you already had. Think about the moments when you felt most peaceful in your life. I'm willing to bet they weren't the moments of greatest achievement or acquisition. They were probably quiet moments, simple moments, moments when you weren't striving or struggling or chasing anything at all. Maybe it was sitting on your porch watching the sunset, or holding a sleeping child, or walking alone on a beach, or reading a good book on a rainy afternoon. In those moments, you weren't trying to create peace. You were simply present enough to notice the peace that was already there. But here's what happens to most people. They experience those moments of peace and immediately start trying to figure out how to make them permanent, how to bottle them, how to control them. And in their effort to capture peace, they lose it. It's like trying to hold water in your bare hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Grace learned something profound in those moments after the experts left her shop. She realized that for 43 years, she had been the guardian of something priceless, but she had failed in her most important responsibility. She had failed to recognize what she was guarding. And because she didn't recognize its value, she didn't protect it properly. She let dust accumulate on it. She let people handle it carelessly. She almost threw it away. Are you making the same mistake with your peace? Are you letting dust accumulate on your tranquility because you don't recognize its value? Are you letting people handle your serenity carelessly because you don't understand its worth? Are you almost ready to throw away your peace because you've been convinced it's not worth keeping? The auction house experts could spot that valuable bowl from across the room because they had trained their eyes to see what others missed. They knew what to look for. They understood the markers of authenticity, the signs of true worth, the difference between what appears valuable and what actually is valuable. You need to train your eyes the same way. You need to learn to recognize the true worth of your peace so that you can protect it like the treasure it is. Because once you lose it, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to buy back what you once had for free. And the price of peace, once it's lost, is always higher than the cost of protecting it in the first place. The story doesn't end with Grace's regret, though. After the auction, after the bowl sold for more than she had ever dreamed, Grace made a decision. She enrolled in classes to study antiques and artifacts. She spent the next 10 years learning to see what she had missed for 43 years. She became an expert herself, and she never again let a treasure sit unrecognized in her presence. The question for you is this: are you going to spend the next 43 years letting your peace collect dust in the corner of your life? Or are you going to start today learning to see its true value and protect it accordingly? Because unlike that ancient bowl, your peace doesn't need experts to authenticate it. You don't need an auction house to tell you what it's worth. You don't need anyone else's approval to begin treating it like the treasure it is. You just need to stop looking past it toward things that will never give you what you already have. The treasure is already in your possession. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Now that you understand your peace is a treasure worth protecting, you need to learn how to actually protect it. And this is where most people make a critical mistake. They build walls around everything except what matters most. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas Blackwood. Thomas was a successful merchant in 19th century Boston who had built an empire through careful planning and strategic thinking. He owned warehouses, shipping routes, and valuable inventory that made him one of the wealthiest men in the city. Thomas understood the importance of protection, so he spared no expense in securing his assets. He built massive stone walls around his warehouses, hired armed guards to patrol his properties, installed the finest locks money could buy on every door, and even kept vicious dogs to deter thieves. His businesses were fortresses. His inventory was safer than gold in a bank vault. Every ship he owned had security measures that would make a military vessel proud. But Thomas made one fatal error in his fortress mentality. While he protected his merchandise, his buildings, and his money with obsessive care, he left his peace completely unguarded. Thomas allowed anyone and everyone to have access to his mind. Business partners would call him at all hours with their emergency. Employees would interrupt his family dinners with their problems. Competitors would send him insulting letters that he would read and reread, letting their words poison his thoughts for days. He would lie awake at night rehearsing arguments with people who had offended him years earlier. He protected his warehouses from thieves, but he left his thoughts wide open to every toxic person who wanted to dump their negativity into his mind. He secured his inventory from weather and fire, but he left his emotions exposed to every criticism, every slight, every petty conflict that came his way. Thomas had insurance policies on his buildings, but no protection plan for his tranquility. He had security systems for his merchandise, but no defense strategy for his serenity. He had guards watching his warehouses 24 hours a day, but he never once stood guard over his own peace of mind. The inevitable happened on a cold February morning. Thomas received word that one of his ships had been captured by pirates off the coast of South America. The cargo was valuable, but it was insured. The financial loss, while significant, would not bankrupt him, but Thomas couldn't let it go. He spent weeks consumed with rage over the theft. He lost sleep, planning revenge against pirates he would never meet. He neglected his other businesses while obsessing over the one loss. He snapped at his wife, ignored his children, and alienated his friends with his constant talk of the injustice he had suffered. Within 6 months, Thomas had lost more peace over that one stolen ship than the ship itself was worth. His health deteriorated from stress and sleeplessness. His other businesses began to fail because he wasn't paying attention to them. His family relationships crumbled under the weight of his obsession. He had successfully protected his physical assets from external threats, but he had failed to protect his internal treasure from his own reaction. The cruel irony was that while Thomas was destroying his peace over the stolen cargo, the pirates who had taken his ship had already forgotten about it. They had moved on to their next target, while Thomas remained trapped in a prison of his own making, reliving the theft over and over again. This is the story of most people's lives. They install security systems to protect their houses, but leave their minds wide open to every negative thought that wants to move in. They lock their cars to prevent theft, but hand over the keys to their peace to anyone who wants to take it for a ride. Or they password protect their phones, but give unlimited access to their tranquility to people who don't even deserve a text message response. You see, protecting your peace is not about building walls around your entire life. It's about understanding what deserves access to your inner world and what doesn't. It's about developing what I call fortress mentality, but applying it in the right places. Thomas eventually learned this lesson, but it cost him dearly. The turning point came when his 8-year-old daughter asked him why he was always angry. Out of the mouths of children came the wisdom he had been missing. His anger was not protecting anything, it was destroying everything. That night, Thomas sat in his study and made a revolutionary decision. He would apply the same strategic thinking to protecting his peace that he had applied to protecting his business. He would build security systems for his mind as sophisticated as the ones guarding his warehouses. First, Thomas identified the 3 main entry points through which threats could reach his peace, his mind, his time, and his energy. Just like a physical fortress has gates that must be guarded, his internal fortress had three gates that needed protection. The gate of his mind was where thoughts, words, and information tried to enter. Thomas realized he had been letting everyone and everything through this gate without inspection. Negative news, toxic conversations, petty gossip, and destructive criticism were walking freely into his mental space and setting up permanent residence. So Thomas became selective about what information he consumed. He stopped reading every piece of bad news that was published. He quit engaging in conversations that served no purpose, except to spread negativity. He refused to let his mind become a dumping ground for other people's complaints and criticisms. But Thomas was careful not to become isolated or ignorant. He still stayed informed about important matters and maintained meaningful relationships. The difference was that he became intentional about what he allowed into his mental space, just like he was intentional about what he allowed into his warehouses. The gate of his time was where activities, commitments, and requests tried to enter. Thomas had been saying yes to everything and everyone, filling his schedule so full that he had no space for peace to exist. He was like a warehouse owner who kept accepting shipments until there was no room left to move around. Thomas learned to guard his time like he guarded his money. He started saying no to commitments that didn't align with his values or priorities. He created space in his schedule for activities that brought him peace. Time with his family, walks in nature, reading books that nourished his soul. The gate of his energy was where people, situations, and emotions tried to drain his resources. Thomas realized that some people were energy vampires who left him feeling exhausted after every interaction. Some situations were energy black holes that consumed his strength without giving anything back. He became strategic about where he invested his emotional energy, just like he was strategic about where he invested his. He stopped arguing with people who had no intention of changing their minds. He quit trying to solve problems that weren't his responsibility to solve. He refused to carry emotional burdens that belonged to other people. The transformation in Thomas's life was remarkable, but it didn't happen overnight. Building fortress mentality requires practice, patience, and persistence. There were days when Thomas forgot to guard his gates and let negativity slip through. There were times when he was too strict and missed out on genuine opportunities for connection and growth. But gradually, Thomas developed what every person needs: the ability to distinguish between real threats and false alarm. Not everything that knocks on the gate of your peace deserves to enter. Not every emergency is actually an emergency. Not every person who demands your attention deserves your energy. The real threats to your peace are not what most people think they are. The real threats are not difficult circumstances, challenging relationships, or unexpected problems. The real threats are your reactions to these things. The real threats are the stories you tell yourself about what happened, the meaning you assign to events, the amount of mental real estate you give to things that are beyond your control. Thomas learned that he could not control pirates, but he could control his response to pirates. He could not control what other people did, but he could control how much access he gave them to his inner world. He could not control external circumstances, but he could control which circumstances he allowed to rent space in his mind. This is fortress mentality, understanding that your peace is a treasure worth protecting, and that protection requires both wisdom and action. It requires the wisdom to know what deserves access to your inner world, and the action to enforce those boundaries consistently. Most people think that protecting their peace means avoiding all conflict, eliminating all stress, and living in a bubble of artificial positivity. But that's not protection, that's isolation. True protection means developing the strength to encounter difficulties without being destroyed by them, the wisdom to engage with challenges without being consumed by them, and the skill to maintain your center even when everything around you is chaos. Your peace is not a fragile thing that breaks at the first sign of trouble. Your peace is a treasure that becomes more valuable the better you learn to protect it. And like Thomas discovered, Once you master the art of guarding your gates, you'll find that you have more energy, more clarity, and more genuine joy than you ever thought possible. But protecting your peace is only the beginning. Once you've secured your treasure, you need to understand how to cultivate it, how to help it grow, and how to ensure it multiplies rather than just survives. Because peace, like any valuable asset, is meant to be invested, not just hoarded. Learning to protect your peace is essential, but protection alone is not enough. You need to understand how to cultivate peace, how to make it grow stronger, and how to access it even when life becomes turbulent. This is where most people fail. They think peace is something you find once and keep forever, like a trophy on a shelf. But peace is more like a skill that must be developed, practiced, and refined. Let me tell you about a man named Kenji, who lived in a small fishing village on the coast of Japan in the early 1900s. Kenji was a pearl diver, one of the most skilled in his region. But what made Kenji different from other divers wasn't his ability to hold his breath or his swimming strength. What made Kenji extraordinary was what he discovered about the nature of pearls and how they were formed. Most pearl divers would search frantically along the ocean floor, grabbing as many oysters as possible before their breath ran out. They worked in chaos, disturbing the sand, stirring up the water, racing against time. These divers would surface with dozens of oysters, but most contained nothing of value. They were so busy searching that they never learned where the real treasures were hidden. Kenji took a different approach. Before he dove, he would spend long minutes floating on the surface, calming his mind, slowing his breathing, becoming perfectly still. While other divers splashed and kicked their way down, Kenji would descend smoothly, like a gentle current moving toward the depth. What Kenji understood that others didn't was this: the most valuable pearls were not found in the shallow, turbulent waters where everyone else was searching. The greatest treasures were in the deepest, calmest parts of the ocean floor, in places that could only be reached by someone who had mastered the art of inner stillness. When Kenji reached these depths, something remarkable happened. The chaos and noise from the surface could not reach him. The frantic splashing of other divers above became irrelevant. The storms that might be raging on the surface had no impact on the tranquil world where the most precious pearls were waiting. But here's what Kenji discovered that changed everything. The oysters that produced the most valuable pearls were not the ones in calm, undisturbed areas of the ocean. The most precious pearls came from oysters that had learned to create beauty in response to irritation. When a grain of sand or a piece of debris entered the oyster, instead of being destroyed by the intrusion, the oyster would coat the irritant with layers of nacre, gradually transforming the source of discomfort into something beautiful and valuable. Kenji realized that peace works the same way. True peace is not the absence of problems, difficulties, or challenges. True peace is the ability to remain calm and centered while those challenges swirl around you. Peace is not about avoiding the storms of life. It's about learning to access the still, quiet depths within yourself where storms cannot reach. When Kenji returned to the village each day, other divers would complain about the rough seas, the bad weather, the difficult conditions. They would blame their poor results on external circumstances. But Kenji's catch was consistently valuable, regardless of the conditions above the surface. One day, a young diver named Hiroshi asked Kenji for his secret. Hiroshi was strong, fast, and could hold his breath longer than most divers, but he rarely found pearls of any value. He was frustrated and exhausted from his frantic search. Kenji smiled and said something that would change Hiroshi's life. "You are looking for pearls in the waves, but pearls are created in the depths. The surface will always be turbulent, but if you learn to reach the calm depths within yourself, you will find treasures that no storm can disturb." Kenji began teaching Hiroshi the art of inner diving. Before entering the water, they would practice reaching a state of complete stillness. Not the kind of stillness where you stop moving, but the kind of stillness where you stop resisting. They would breathe deeply, releasing tension, releasing anxiety, releasing the need to control outcomes. Hiroshi was skeptical at first. This approach seemed too slow, too passive. He was used to aggressive searching, rapid movement, intense effort. But Kenji was patient, and gradually Hiroshi began to understand. The first time Hiroshi successfully reached the deep, calm state that Kenji had taught him, everything changed. As he descended into the ocean, he noticed that his movements became effortless. His breathing was relaxed, his mind was clear, and when he reached the ocean floor, he was not frantically searching, he was calmly observing. In that state of peaceful awareness, the valuable oysters seemed to reveal themselves. But the real revelation came when Hiroshi surfaced above the water. The other divers were struggling against rough seas, complaining about the challenging conditions, but Hiroshi realized that the storms on the surface had not affected his experience in the depths at all. He had found a place of peace that existed regardless of external circumstances. This is the pearl diver's wisdom that you must understand. Peace is not dependent on peaceful circumstances. Peace is a state of inner stillness that you can access even when everything around you is chaotic. The goal is not to eliminate all problems from your life. The goal is to develop the ability to remain centered and calm while those problems exist. Most people spend their entire lives trying to control their external circumstances so they can feel peaceful. They think that once they get the right job, the right relationship, the right house, the right bank account, then they will have peace. But this is like trying to calm the ocean by smoothing the waves. It's impossible and exhausting. The pearl diver's approach is different. Instead of trying to control the waves, you learn to dive beneath them. Instead of trying to eliminate all sources of irritation from your life, you learn to transform irritation into wisdom, difficulty into strength, challenges into growth. Kenji taught Hiroshi that there are 3 levels of peace, just like there are different depths in the ocean. Surface peace is temporary and dependent on favorable conditions. This is the peace most people experience occasionally when everything in their life is going well. But as soon as circumstances change, this peace disappears. Middle depth peace is more stable but still affected by major storms. This is the peace that comes from having some control over your thoughts and emotions. You can maintain this peace during minor difficulties, but major challenges can still disturb it. Deep peace is the treasure that Kenji had discovered. This is the peace that exists at the core of your being, beneath all the turbulence of daily life. This peace is not created by circumstances, it is accessed through inner stillness. This peace is not dependent on what happens to you, it is dependent on your ability to connect with the calm center that exists within you always. The pearl diver's wisdom teaches us that peace is not something you achieve once and keep forever. Peace is something you must dive for daily. Every morning, you must make the conscious choice to descend beneath the surface chaos of your life and connect with the deep stillness within. Some days the dive will be easy and you'll reach that place of peace quickly. Other days the surface storms will be so intense that reaching the depths requires more effort and patience. But the treasure is always there, waiting for you in the quiet depths of your own being. And here's the multiplication principle that Kenji discovered. The more consistently you access deep peace, the more peace you have to share with others. Peaceful people attract peace. Calm people create calm environments. Still people bring stillness to chaotic situations. Your peace becomes a gift, not just to yourself, but to everyone around you. Like the valuable pearls that Kenji brought back to the surface, the peace you cultivate in the depths of your being becomes a treasure that enriches your entire community. Now you understand how to protect your peace and how to cultivate it from the depths within yourself. But there's something even more important that most people never consider. Your peace is not just about you. Your peace is an inheritance that will be passed down to future generations, whether you realize it or not. And like any inheritance, it can either build wealth over time or be squandered in a single generation. Let me tell you about the Wellington family who built one of the most successful trading businesses in Victorian England. For 3 generations, the Wellingtons accumulated wealth, property, and influence through careful planning, disciplined saving, and wise investments. By 1885, they owned textile mills, shipping companies, and vast estates across the countryside. The family fortune was estimated to be worth millions, an extraordinary sum for that time. The family's success was built on more than just business acumen. The first generation, led by patriarch Edmund Wellington, had established what they called the Wellington Way, a set of principles that governed not just their business dealings, but their entire approach to life. These principles included integrity in all transactions, patience in decision-making, and most importantly, the preservation of family harmony above all material gains. Edmund understood something that many wealthy families miss: money without peace is just expensive stress. So he didn't just pass down financial assets to his children, he passed down a legacy of tranquility. Family meetings were conducted with respect and civility. Disagreements were handled through calm discussion rather than heated argument. Business decisions were made collectively, with every family member's input valued and considered. For 60 years, this approach worked beautifully. The second generation, led by Edmund's son Charles, continued to build on the foundation of both wealth and peace. They expanded the business internationally while maintaining the family harmony that had made their success possible. The third generation inherited not just money, but a proven system for maintaining both prosperity and tranquility. But then came the fourth generation, and everything changed. James Wellington, Edmund's great-grandson, inherited the family business in James was intelligent, ambitious, and capable, but he had grown up taking the family's peace for granted. He had never experienced the chaos and conflict that destroyed other wealthy families because his ancestors had worked so hard to prevent it. To James, family harmony seemed automatic, natural, inevitable. James made a fatal assumption. He believed that peace was a permanent asset rather than something that required constant maintenance and protection. He focused entirely on growing the financial inheritance while neglecting the emotional and spiritual inheritance that had made the financial success possible in the first place. Under James's leadership, family meetings became battlegrounds. He would interrupt his siblings, dismiss their concerns, and make unilateral decisions without consultation. When his cousins raised objections to his aggressive expansion plans, James would ridicule their caution and accuse them of lacking vision. He replaced the calm deliberation of previous generations with impatient urgency and emotional volatility. The contamination effect was swift and devastating. James's chaos infected every family gathering, every business meeting, every holiday celebration. His siblings began avoiding family events to escape the conflict. His cousins started making their own business decisions without consulting the rest of the family. The unity that had taken 3 generations to build began crumbling in a matter of months. Within 5 years, the Wellington family was engaged in bitter lawsuits against each other. Brothers sued brothers over business decisions. Cousins fought cousins over property rights. The family that had once been a model of prosperity and harmony became a cautionary tale of how quickly peace can be lost and how expensive that loss can be. The legal fees alone consumed hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the real cost was far greater than money. Relationships that had taken generations to build were destroyed in courtrooms. Children grew up watching their parents fight with their aunts and uncles. The family name, once associated with integrity and success, became synonymous with greed and conflict. By 1920, the Wellington business empire had collapsed. The family fortune was gone, consumed by legal battles and poor decisions made in anger rather than wisdom. But even worse than the financial loss was the emotional bankruptcy. Family members stopped speaking to each other. Holidays were divided affairs, with different branches of the family celebrating separately. Children grew up not knowing their own cousins. James Wellington died in 1923, bitter and alone, having destroyed in one generation what had taken 3 generations to build. But the tragedy didn't end with James. The chaos he had introduced into the family system continued to multiply across generations. James's children inherited not wealth, but conflict. They inherited not peace, but anxiety. They inherited not harmony, but dysfunction. And they passed these negative inheritances down to their children, who passed them down to their children, creating cycles of family chaos that lasted for decades. This is the inheritance principle that you must understand. Whatever you do with your peace today will be passed down to the people who come after you. Your children will inherit your level of tranquility or your level of chaos. Your students, employees, friends, and community will receive either the gift of your peace or the burden of your anxiety. Peace, like wealth, compounds over time when it's properly invested. When you maintain your peace consistently, you create an environment where others can develop their own peace. Your calm responses teach others how to respond calmly. Your peaceful presence gives others permission to let go of their own tension. Your tranquility becomes a model that others can follow. But chaos also compounds over time. When you allow your peace to be destroyed, you don't just hurt yourself, you create ripple effects that can damage relationships, families, and communities for generations. Your angry reactions teach others that anger is an acceptable response to difficulty. Your anxiety becomes contagious, spreading to everyone around you. Your chaos becomes a legacy that others inherit whether they want it or not. The Wellington family story teaches us that peace is not just a personal asset, it's a generational responsibility. You are not just the beneficiary of peace, you are its steward. You have inherited peace from those who came before you, and you have a responsibility to pass it on to those who come after you. Think about the people who influenced your own relationship with peace. Maybe it was a grandparent who remained calm during family crises, teaching you that it was possible to stay centered even when everyone else was falling apart. Maybe it was a teacher who never raised their voice, showing you that authority didn't require aggression. Maybe it was a friend who listened without judgment, demonstrating that peace was more powerful than pressure. These people gave you a gift more valuable than money. They modeled what peace looked like in action. They showed you that it was possible to maintain tranquility even in difficult circumstances. They passed down to you an inheritance of calm that no bank account could match. Now you have the same opportunity and the same responsibility. Every interaction you have is either depositing peace into someone else's account or withdrawing from it. Every response you make is either building the inheritance of tranquility that you pass on or destroying it. Your peace is not just about you. Your peace is about the child who watches how you handle stress and learns from your example. Your peace is about the colleague who observes how you respond to pressure and decides whether chaos or calm is the better approach. Your peace is about the friend who needs to know that tranquility is possible in a chaotic world. The inheritance principle demands that you think beyond yourself, beyond your immediate circumstances, beyond your current challenges. It requires you to consider the legacy you're creating, the example you're setting, the inheritance you're preparing to pass down, because long after you're gone, your peace will continue to influence the world through the people you touched, the example you set, and the inheritance you left behind. There was a master goldsmith in ancient Rome named Marcus Aurelius Varro, who possessed a skill that seemed almost supernatural. He could detect counterfeit gold with his eyes closed, simply by holding it in his hands. While other goldsmiths needed tools, tests, and careful examination, Varro could tell genuine gold from fake within seconds of touching it. When people asked him how he developed this ability, Varro would smile and say, "When you spend every day working with pure gold, your hands learn to recognize anything that is not pure gold. The fake feels different, sounds different, even weighs different. You don't learn to detect counterfeit gold by studying counterfeits. You learn to detect counterfeits by becoming intimately familiar with the real thing." This is exactly what you must do with your peace. You must become so familiar with genuine peace that you can instantly detect anything that threatens to contaminate it. You must develop such sensitivity to real tranquility that fake peace, temporary calm, and artificial serenity become immediately obvious to your inner awareness. Most people have never experienced pure peace long enough to know what it actually feels like. They mistake the absence of major problems for peace. They confuse temporary relief for lasting tranquility. They think that feeling good is the same as having peace. But these are counterfeits, and once you know the real thing, you'll never be satisfied with substitutes again. Creating a gold standard lifestyle means establishing your peace as the measure against which all other decisions are evaluated. Just as gold has been the standard of value for thousands of years because of its purity and stability, your peace becomes the standard by which you measure the true worth of every opportunity, relationship, and commitment that comes your way. When someone offers you a job that pays more money but requires you to compromise your tranquility, you measure that offer against your gold standard. When a relationship promises excitement but delivers chaos, you evaluate it against the purity of your peace. When an opportunity sounds impressive but feels wrong in your spirit, you test it against the standard of your inner calm. The gold standard lifestyle requires you to create what I call a personal constitution for peace protection. This constitution becomes your governing document, the set of principles that guide every decision you make. Just as a country's constitution protects the rights of its citizens, your personal constitution protects the integrity of your peace. Your constitution might include statements like, I will not engage in conversations that serve no purpose except to spread negativity. I will not commit to obligations that compromise my ability to maintain inner calm. I will not allow other people's emergencies to become my crises unless I choose to help. I will not sacrifice my long-term peace for short-term pleasures or profits. When you live by a gold standard, something remarkable happens. You stop being reactive and become responsive. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your experience. You stop letting other people set the emotional temperature of your environment and start creating the climate you want to live in. The transformation that occurs when you truly adopt the gold standard lifestyle is profound. You discover that you have more energy because you're not wasting it on things that don't matter. You find that you make better decisions because you're not making them from a place of stress or pressure. You realize that your relationships improve because you're bringing your best self to every interaction. People will notice the change in you, and they'll want to know your secret. They'll see that you remain calm when others panic, that you stay centered when others are scattered, that you maintain your peace when others lose theirs. You become living proof that peace is possible, even in a chaotic world. This is your legacy, not just protecting your own peace, but showing others that peace is achievable. Not just cultivating your own tranquility, but creating environments where others can develop theirs. Not just maintaining your own calm, but passing on the gold standard to everyone whose life you touch. Your peace is gold. Treat it accordingly. Protect it fiercely. Cultivate it daily. Pass it on generously. And watch as your life becomes a treasure that enriches not just you, but everyone around you. The gold standard life starts today. The question is not whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing to do what it takes to live like the treasure you are.